Guys, tonight I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about MLA style and citation. I know that this is something that you've been practicing in English 101, and now you're practicing some more in English 102. And as you write in your academic career, particularly in the humanities, you will be using this format. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the recommendations MLA makes in the 8th edition for citing resources, and also how we might investigate resources to know what choices to make, particularly the Little Red Riding Hood resource that we've been looking at as a primary source in our study of the short story and the film. I want to take a look at that website that we looked at pitt.edu because it's actually a pretty tricky source to cite, and I want to talk about why. So we're going to do that, and we'll also talk very briefly. I'll just give you some tips for after I walk you through this complicated one. I'll just briefly tell you some tips for citing a video from a streaming service. So when the new MLA updated, one of the things that the editors concentrated on is, instead of having these thousands of different models that students would need to look up in a book, find the model, and then try to emulate the model, which they were often not successful at because they didn't understand what exactly was going on in the model. Instead, MLA is taking a more holistic approach to citing sources and saying, putting the empowering rather the writer to be able to say what they think is most important and should be highlighted to their reader about the resource. And so that means that you have some flexibility as a writer in terms of what information you accentuate in your citation. And the idea is that instead of having one model for a variety of different things, having one guideline where you can then add in your own containers upon containers for things instead of having to have a specific rigid model. And if you think about it, because of digital resources, this makes sense. Before, when MLA, back when I was young, before the earth was cooling, before everything was on the internet, there was definitely one way to cite a book with an author. And once we have more digital resources, and then you start adding in how different the websites are and what information is available and the different types of resources that can be posted online, that changed the nature of that, because everything's kind of fluid in terms of where we locate these resources. That changed how we locate how we cite our sources. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we might do that when we think about that citation for Little Red Riding Hood. So the basics are the same. You want to have the author of the piece's last name first, and then their first name. Then you want to have the title of the source. And then you want to add in the different containers. And in a second, when I pull up the website, I'm going to show you what I mean about containers. Then you can add in things like contributors and publishers and publication dates and where you found it and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at the website that we used for our primary source of the tale of Little Red Riding Hood by Charles Perrault. Okay, so a website is a container. All right. And if you think of it this way, think about, remember like the little Russian dolls? I don't know if you ever saw those on Sesame Street. Sometimes they use them, where there's a bigger doll with a little doll inside of it, with a smaller doll with an even smaller doll. That's what you want to kind of think of with these containers. And so at first glance, we have found a short story by an author on a website when we first glance at it. When we start learning a little bit more about the source as we scroll down and look around, we realize that the person that posted this on their website got it from this guy who published it in his book, The Blue Fairy Book, in 1891. And this guy, Andrew, he got it from Charles Perrault's book, Histories of the Times Past with Morals. That's a rough translation of the French. It's been a while since I'm fluent in French, but it's been a while since I've read or spoke it. And so he took that from Charles Perrault's book that was written in 1697. Okay? So, we have a container within a container within a container within a container. Okay? Because we have an original story, because remember, Charles Perrault is French. He wrote this in 1697 in Paris. You know how a lot of the world speaks English today? That's not the case in 1697. As a matter of fact, a lot of the world spoke French in 1697. More English aristocrats spoke French than French aristocrats spoke English. Okay, so Charles Perrault definitely wrote this in English in 1697, and he put it into a book. That's a container. He wrote the short story, Little Red Riding Hood. You can imagine him at a desk with a big quill pen, penning the short story of Little Red Riding Hood into a book of the histories of the times past. And then couple 100 years later, 100 years plus later, Andrew Lang takes this thing that's written in French, reproduces it into, it doesn't say translates, it just says he reproduced it. So I'm just going to go with he reproduced it, so edited it, into his book, The Blue Fairy Book, in 1891. Okay, so container 1, Charles Perrault's piece. Container 2, Andrew Lang's Blue Fairy Book. All right. Then in 2015, this wild and crazy guy, Dr. Ashleyman, said, you know what? The world would like to read these stories. And so I'm going to take this story that I've translated from French, and I'm going to post it on my faculty website because I'm a scholar and I like people to have free info. So there comes our next container. All right. So here you can hear Bella. She's getting a little annoyed. MLA format is not her favorite, so she's going to shake her little collar at that. She's saying, too many containers, lady. But, you know, it is what it is. So, we have Perrault's piece, we have Lang's book, we have Ashleyman's website, and we have the University of Pittsburgh because they host the website. Okay? So, that's 4 containers. Now, because this is a massive citation, I've gone ahead and typed up the information into here because I thought that would be a little bit easier, so I wouldn't have to do it all and you like painfully watch me type something out. Okay, so I've put in the information. So here's how I did it. I took and I said, okay, so I know the thing I want to highlight the most is the short story because that's the primary source we're working with. Okay, and so I put the author's last name, Perrault Charles, and then I put the title of the piece. And I thought since we're going to be making a distinguishing comment about the different editions, since we're going to put all 3 in, I thought that it would be helpful if I went ahead and put the title of the book it was originally published in, the place it was published, and the date. Okay? Especially since we're going to talk about a translation. So, if you left out this part, the title of that book, I would think that's okay, but I think it's important that we highlight to our reader that this is written in France in 1697, okay, because it is an old text, all right? So if you left this highlighted part out, that's fine. I think that you could make an argument for why you did, but you should definitely have Charles Perrault, Little Red Riding Hood, Paris, 1697. Okay? So then the second part of this is the second container. And that is where Lang writes the Blue Fairy Book or edits or compiles the Blue Fairy Book in 1891 in London. We're also, Mr. Al-Shaman is awesome, or doctor, I don't know. I'm assuming he's doctor because if he was at Pitt for that many years and he has his own updated website, I'm just gonna go ahead and give him the honorific of doctor. So if Dr. Ashliman obviously has had students before because he makes sure to give us all of this information. This is not the case on some websites. We sometimes have to go hunting for this information because they don't have it on there. But he's giving us the information. And so I think it would be important if someone that was reading your text wanted to go look up Andrew Lang's book, that we gave them a little bit of information. So this is edited by Andrew Lang. The Blue Fairy book. Oh, I kind of mix these up here. I'm going to go ahead. I think it would make more sense to put this after 5th edition, that it's in London. I'm going to go ahead and take this out here. Everything's revisible, right? Okay. So I'm going to do edited by Andrew Lang. The Blue Fairy book, 5th edition, London, 18. Of course, I knocked off, was it 91? Yeah, I knocked off the 1 there. In London in 1891. So that tells our reader, hey, I read this primary source of Little Red Riding Hood from Charles Perrault that he wrote in Paris in 1697. And I read it because this guy, Andrew Lang, put it in his Blue Fairy book that he edited in London in 1891. And now here comes the last part of the container. Dr. Ashliman translated it into English for me and titled it Little Red Riding Hood and put it on the University of Pittsburgh's website in 2015 it's actually the 15th of January 2015. This is why we revise. Okay. And then at the end, I've gone ahead and put in the website. Now, in the new MLA, web addresses are optional. I say baloney. You should always, if you can put a link to something, put the link in it. You know why? Because then your reader can just click on the link and go to the link, and life is easier. I mean, why wouldn't you do that? So I always say, put that link at the end and make sure it works, because you know what's really helpful? Clicking on a link and going to it, right? But the web is like an ocean. What washes up one day might not wash up another day. So if 3 years from now I were to go back to your annotated bibliography or your works cited on a essay that you wrote, and I clicked on it and couldn't find it, I would have all this information so that I could track it down. Okay. So that is how the container within the container within the container works. These are things I've picked to emphasize and choices that I've made to emphasize them, and you could maybe tweak some of them a little bit. That would be fine, but I do think it's important to include all 3 of these guys in your citation, because we are given all that information, and it lets the reader know the genesis of the timing that this book came out. And why do I have against 1s in this thing? Okay. So once we have our citation, now we need to do the easy, our fun part, or the good part you can do while you're procrastinating, which is make things look pretty. So we're going to go ahead and center works cited. Now remember, your works cited is a part of the document that you're writing. So it should not be its own separate document with your name and stuff like that on it. It should just go at the end of your essay or your project or your paper in the same file, okay? And so now I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to right-click, select paragraph. I am going to make a few changes here, okay? See where it says special? I'm going to change that to hanging, and that's going to give me that awesome hanging indent where it looks like the author's name is falling off the cliff. And then I'm going to do line spacing double, because we should double space our citations. And I'm going to click OK. And now look at my beautiful citation. Oh, Bella, you sighed. You were so happy that it's over, aren't you? You really hate MLA format. At least she hasn't been so grumpy like she usually is. Sometimes when I teach MLA format, the whole time I say MLA format, she sighs. At any rate, so that is the long and complicated Little Red Riding Hood citation. Container within the container within the container within the container. You might have done this similar. You might have left a thing or two out, but this is how I would do it. And again, there are going to be things that you can do to you have to think of what you want to emphasize to your reader. And I'm telling you that you want to emphasize these 3 people to your reader, okay? And the dates. The dates are the most important part to me, okay? So I really think that you should, sorry, I'm cleaning up the little spaces. It's the English teacher in me. I can't help myself. Let me put the period in the right spot. There we go. Okay. You want to make sure that you do those same things too, okay? Same thing goes for if you're watching a film in a on a streaming service, right? There's a bunch of stuff. This is a container within a container within a container, because you have a film that was written by some people, created, have a director, it has actors in it, it comes out at a certain time, there's a length that the film is, and you want to put in whatever you're emphasizing. So, for instance, if you're just talking in general about the film, you probably just want to talk about the director, because they're the big guy in charge, okay? You probably want to include you want to include the title, you want to include the director, you want to include the production company, you probably want to include the length and the date that it was released. Those are the kinds of general things that you want to produce. Remember, if you watch it on a streaming site, you need to put in the other container, and that is the information about the streaming site. Did you get it from Amazon? Did you watch it on Netflix? So that's kind of how you should think about doing a streaming service. And you can kind of Google around and see some different examples of how you do one. There is no right way. It's just giving as many, there's wrong ways, but there's not one way to do it. It's giving as much information as you can. And also, say maybe you're talking just about Anne Hathaway the entire time and her voice work that she did. So instead of the director, you might want to put Anne Hathaway and then the character's name and then the name of the film, because maybe you're just emphasizing that. So you can feel free to have a little bit more freedom with these things, okay? But still using those basics. Author, title of source, container, contributors, version, number, publish and publication date, location. And using those things to kind of help you along. So this is my brief 17-minute talk on MLA format. I hope it has helped you, and I hope it will help you improve when you do some of those trickier style citations. And remember, you can always ask the ASC, the tutors in the ASC, for help with your MLA format. And you can also always ask me if you have a question. I hope this has helped you to improve, and good luck on your next assignment.